If you've been on the hunt for the perfect night of sleep, you've likely been looking into a lot of climate control systems for your bed. There are a lot of them out there, only they don't work the same and they don't provide the same benefits as one another. I decided to pit the BedJet 3 against the 8 Sleep Pod 4 to see which one was most effective, especially for my needs. And I'll tell you everything you need to know about my experiences with both and which one I recommend the highest. I'll give you a little spoiler alert right out the gate. It's the 8 Sleep Pod. The BedJet 3 is essentially a climate control system that uses a fan with a really wide hose and a nozzle that blows cool or warm air beneath your fitted sheet. It's supposed to affect the temperature of the entire mattress. In my experience, it's mostly the lower half of the bed that you notice the temperature change the most. But it is a very budget-friendly option. When you're looking for a climate control system for your bed, the BedJet is definitely one of the cheaper ones out there. The 8 Sleep Pod is much more of a comprehensive climate control system. Instead of using air to conduct the temperature changes the way that the BedJet does, 8 Sleep uses water, and it involves having a full mattress cover that fits over any mattress from full to California King, and it has a separate hub that sort of looks like a desktop computer that sits off to the side of the bed somewhere, and it controls the temperature across the entire surface of the mattress. For me personally, I need temperature control across the entire surface of the mattress. I appreciate that the BedJet is as cost effective as it is. It's a great budget friendly option, and it really works when the bulk of what you need as far as like feeling a change in temperature, when it's more your feet and legs, the BedJet is really effective. Beyond that, like from your waist up and especially around your shoulders and neck, you don't really feel it all that much, or at least we didn't. Whether I was sleeping alone or sharing the bed with my husband, you don't feel the temperature underneath your body so much as around it. Whereas the 8 Sleep, you feel it underneath yourself the entire night. Like it's subtle, it's not anything, it's not like you're sleeping on a block of ice, but you feel the coolness or the heat directly beneath your body, and it's just a lot more effective compared to the BedJet. So I tried the BedJet first. Obviously it is the more budget friendly of the two, and it was okay. The setup process was easy. The fan is definitely strong. And I knew I set it up correctly when I had it all put together and I turned it on and I saw my blanket start to rise up off of the bed. That's the telltale signal that everything is set up correctly. The first night that I slept with it, I definitely felt the temperature change. It's immediate because it is a fan, so pretty much the moment you turn it on, you'll start feeling a difference pretty much right away. In my case, I was using it on a cooling setting because I've been dealing with a lot of hot flashes, and I'm just a lot warmer when I sleep these days. That said, I noticed most of the cooling around my feet and legs, which is less than perfect for me because when I'm getting a hot flash, it's typically up my back, my shoulders, and my neck. Those are the areas that I tend to feel it the most when it comes on. So, I've got the BedJet blowing near my feet and legs, and, my upper half is kind of like not really getting a whole lot of benefit from that. The other thing that I struggled with, and it really is more of a me problem, when I sleep, I tend to sleep farther away from the head of the bed, so I have a foot sticking off the end. That's just the way that I sleep. I'm most comfortable that way. I'm on my stomach, one foot's always hanging off. That's just it. Well, the nozzle of the BedJet has to sit along the foot of the bed, which in my case, since I share a bed with my husband, it's sort of in the middle between the two of us. And, you know, it's not a very convenient place for me because my foot is always kicking at it, you know, bumping it. I'm nudging it in the night. It's just not really a great setup for me. The BedJet I can see being effective for somebody when they really ideally need cooling or heating against their feet and legs, but for full body temperature control, it leaves a lot to be desired. So the BedJet does have a few things going for it in terms of pros. It's definitely a much more budget-friendly climate control option for your bed, and I think that it works really well for like warming and cooling of your feet and legs. So I can imagine, like, you know, in the winter, if you deal with cold feet especially, yeah, the BedJet would be awesome for that because it really is effective on the lower half of your body. And the setup was a breeze. It was very quick to come together, and I was good to go in 10 minutes. Like it really took next to no time at all. But the cons outweigh the pros, at least in my experience. The biggest thing to point out is that it cannot cool your sleep surface if your room is hot. You know, if you live somewhere and you don't have air conditioning, or if you do have air conditioning and it just really sucks in your bedroom, the BedJet really cannot get cooler than the room temperature is. So it's not a replacement for an air conditioner or anything, you know, and as a fan, it works like any other fan would in a hot room. It's just going to blow warm air. So, you know, it's not necessarily the best when you need something that's really going to cool you off no matter what. In my experience, the effects are really only felt along the lower half of your body. So if you're looking for something that is going to be like full mattress, full body temperature control, the BedJet really doesn't provide that. Additionally, like most fans, the higher it's running, the louder it gets. You know, it's like it's a fan, so it's going to get louder when you have it on its higher settings. The other thing is that, you know, you can run the BedJet with dual zone control, but you have to buy a second unit to do that. It isn't automatically something that can be set up with a single BedJet unit. If you want to control two sides of the bed, you have to get two BedJets. There are no automatic adjustments overnight. The way that the 8 sleep pod will just sort of adjust to however you're sleeping, the BedJet really doesn't do that. You can control it manually, of course, but it's not going to be something that senses how you're sleeping and then adjusts for you. And finally, and this is more of a me problem, but because the nozzle sits at the edge of the bed, and when you're sharing a bed with somebody, ideally that's going to be in the center of the foot of the bed, I always sleep with a foot hanging off, so it's very easy to kick. It's, you know, or nudge. It's just always kind of right there in the way. And you also notice it a bit even when your bed is made. Like, you can sort of see that lump at the end of, you know, wherever you've got the nozzle, you're going to kind of see it hanging out there. So admittedly, the 8 sleep had a pretty low bar to reach as far as effectiveness when I got around to testing it after the BedJet. That said, it exceeded my expectations. I'm not even really sure what I expected. I think I thought that it was going to wildly change the surface of my mattress. You know, I think I was a little afraid that, you know, the idea of having a cooling mattress, that it was going to be too cold, or it was going to be like a block of ice while I was sleeping on it. And it really isn't that way. The cooling and the heating from the 8 Sleep Pod is a lot more subtle. If you run your hands across the surface of the mattress while it's running, you might notice a little bit of a temperature change, but it's not excessive. It isn't until you're laying on it and your body's sort of pressing into the mattress, and then that's when you feel all of the temperature along every piece of your body that's pressing into the mattress. And it's a little weird to get used to in a good way. I was really stunned the first night that I used the 8 Sleep. I think the autopilot adjusted it like 26 times over the course of the night. That's how many temperature changes, like little fluctuations that it made all throughout the night, that first night. But I slept so well. I was able to, have it set to, in my case, -3, which is about around 74 degrees Fahrenheit. And I was able to sleep with that while also having my quilt and my sheet up over my body, because I really do appreciate having a blanket. Even in the middle of summer, I like the weight. I like the security of a blanket. I like my security blanket. It's just really, it's a very cozy thing for me. So the fact that I was able to use the 8 Sleep to cool my sleeping surface and still use my blanket and not have a hot flash, it took a little bit of getting used to, just because I was never accustomed to having a sleep surface that stayed cool all night. Any typical bed that you lay in, it's going to warm to your body heat pretty quickly, and that's just sort of the way that most mattresses work. And the 8 Sleep Pod mattress cover sort of, it's a little strange to get used to, but it works so well. One thing I noticed about the 8 Sleep Pod is that it's not as immediate as the BedJet. Whereas the BedJet uses a fan and it's, forcing air, and you feel that pretty much right away. The 8 Sleep is a lot more subtle. It's once it's been turned on and it's, adjusting the temperature, however it's adjusting it, you feel it sort of creep on a little more slowly. And in fact, that's one thing that I noticed. When you set a bedtime with the 8 Sleep, it'll automatically come on before you go to bed. So, if you have your bedtime set as 1 o'clock in the morning, the 8 Sleep is going to turn on. I think it's around midnight. It's like an hour. So it just adjusts itself and gets the whole mattress set for you before you go to bed. And I thought that was kind of awesome. That's a nice touch for sure. But when you first turn it on and you're laying in bed, and actually the first time I used it, I was laying there and I think I thought I was going to feel something immediately. And when I didn't, I sat up because I thought, okay, something's wrong. I need to figure out what I did when I was setting this up. And that's when I started to feel that cooling sensation directly under my butt. And that I realized, oh, it is working. And so I laid back down, and after a few minutes, felt the cooling along any part of my body that was making contact with the mattress. So it is a lot more subtle, but as far as effectiveness, it blows the BedJet out of the water. So the 8 Sleep has its share of pros and cons. In my experience, the pros vastly outweigh the cons. I'll just run them off a list real quick. The 8 Sleep provides climate control across the entire surface of your mattress and allows for dual zone control if you want it. Like if you share your bed with somebody, it just comes with it. And it cools and warms your sleep surface completely independently of ambient room temperature. So it doesn't matter how hot or how cold your room is, it's going to adjust the temperature in its own little independent way. Doesn't matter what the room temperature is. Even though the pod adjusts your temperature automatically through the night, you can also do manual adjustments if you want to. The hub itself operates ridiculously quietly. I live in a city, so there's always sort of like a background noise and traffic and things like that. And the hub really isn't any louder than the central air. Like it's very quiet. I think in the quietest sealed room you would probably notice it a little bit, but other than that, it's next to nothing at all. What I appreciate is that the mattress cover that comes with the pod doesn't change the feeling of my existing mattress. It's not any firmer or any softer, and even underneath the sheet, it doesn't feel any different than it did before I put it on. And the one cool thing about the 8 Sleep is that there is an optional alarm setting. So if you want to use it, basically how it works is as you get to your alarm, like when your alarm goes off, the surface will start to warm up a little bit to sort of like tell your body that it's time to wake up. And in addition, there is like a vibration alarm, and it sort of feels like a cell phone is going off inside your mattress. But it's really, really subtle, and it's kind of nice, actually. I know my husband appreciates it because I'm somebody who hits the snooze button 8,000 times, and he gets tired of hearing the radio go off every 9 minutes. And so at least with the 8 Sleep, I don't have to do that. The only real cons to the 8 Sleep are the steep price point. It is an investment, one that I think is worth it, but compared to other climate control systems, it is on the pricier side. The autopilot subscription is required for the first year, and I think it's a good idea to have it and keep it because it does provide a lot of sleep data. The next day it'll tell you everything you need to know about how you slept the night before, and it gives you a sleep score, tells you about your heart rate, your breath rate, what your snoring was like, which, if you snore or if you think you don't snore and you find out that you do, that can be a little unsettling. But, it's useful data. But over time, it helps the pod to perform better. So, the more data that it gets, the more nights that you sleep with it, it basically gets to know you better. So the whole pod is a lot more effective. So it is worth it. And the only other con is the setup time. Compared to the BedJet, the 8 Sleep takes quite a bit longer to set up. It's not difficult if you go step by step through the instructions, like how it takes you through all of that. But, it is a little bit of a process. So looking at the specs of the 8 Sleep pod compared to the BedJet, like I mentioned, the 8 Sleep is much more of an investment, albeit one that is worth it. The pricing on the 8 Sleep, depending on the model and the size of the mattress cover that you need, runs anywhere from around $2,400 to over $5,000, whereas the BedJet is about $699. It's a pretty big difference. One thing I do want to point out, though, is that if you're looking for something with dual zone control and you want to achieve that with the BedJet, you do have to buy 2 separate units. And for best results, they sell their own proprietary cloud sheet that is supposed to conduct the heating and cooling a little more effectively. That's an additional expense. The 8 Sleep pod is a mattress cover that uses circulating water to conduct the temperature change, versus the BedJet, which uses a fan nozzle, and that's pretty much placed at like the foot of the bed, maybe along the side of the bed, but it's fan cooling and there is no refrigerant. So where the 8 Sleep will control your bed climate completely independent of the ambient room temperature, your room could be 90 degrees and the 8 Sleep can cool your bed surface to 70, no problem. The BedJet does not do that. It really can't get any cooler than the ambient room temperature. So it's not a replacement for air conditioning, but if you have a really warm bedroom and you're looking for something that's going to cool your bed down, the BedJet will blow air, but it's not going to reach a temperature that's really cooler than the ambient room temperature. Taking a look at the controls, the 8 Sleep is pretty much just app controlled. There are pads on either side of the mattress that you can tap to adjust the temperature up or down, or to turn the vibration alarm off if you're using that. Otherwise, it's app control, and it runs automatically through the autopilot app, or you can do it manually through your phone. The BedJet, on the other hand, uses either an app or remote, but the controls are only ever manual. The BedJet will not adjust itself over the course of the night based on how you're sleeping or the room temperature. It's a lot more manual compared to the 8 Sleep.